It was a sweltering July, one of those stretches where the air hung heavy and humid, making even the slightest movement feel like a Herculean effort. My old Victorian house, usually a sanctuary, became a place of dread when I pulled my water bill from the mailbox. The number on it wasn't just high, it was astronomical, looking like it belonged to a small commercial complex, not a single-family home. My jaw practically hit the floor, and my heart hammered against my ribs, convinced there had to be a typo. My house, a legacy from its previous owner, had a commercial-grade water meter, a high-accuracy instrument designed for precision, leaving virtually no room for error. This meter was screaming that I was using an insane amount of water, an amount that simply wasn't possible. I spent days frantically checking for leaks, listening to pipes, and inspecting my sprinklers. Nothing. Everything seemed normal, which only deepened the mystery and my mounting frustration. Then Karen, my neighbor 2 houses down, entered the picture. She was a perpetually tanned woman with a loud laugh, generally tolerated but not actively sought out. Around that time, her backyard began a significant transformation, culminating in a brand-new, above-ground swimming pool. It was a substantial pool, easily holding thousands of gallons. I barely registered it beyond a fleeting observation amidst my water bill anxieties. But as the days turned into weeks, subtle observations began to pile up. I started noticing the constant hum of a pump coming from her direction, especially in the late evenings and early mornings. And then there were the hoses, thick, dark green, snaking across her lawn, disappearing behind bushes, or running along the side of her house. Sometimes it looked like it was connected to nothing visible. Other times, I'd see her out there, watering plants with a hose far too robust for a few flower beds. My suspicion grew like a creeping vine, and one afternoon, while watering my own herbs, I noticed a distinct, albeit subtle, dip in my water pressure. My hose flow weakened for a few minutes, then slowly returned to normal. I looked down the street, and Karen was by her pool, tinkering with that same robust hose coiled near her feet. My stomach clenched. The next time my water pressure wavered, I acted. It was early evening, the sun dipping below the horizon. I heard the faint hum again. I grabbed my phone, switched on the flashlight, and walked purposefully towards the side of my house closest to Karen's property. The old fence between our yards was overgrown with ivy. I crouched down, heart pounding, and shone my light along the base of the fence. There it was, barely visible beneath a thick curtain of ivy, a dark green industrial hose running directly from the spigot on my side of the house. It snaked through a small, cleverly concealed gap in the fence and disappeared into Karen's yard. It wasn't just a hose, it was the hose, the same type I'd seen her with, the same one that appeared whenever my pressure dropped. My blood ran cold. The astronomical water bill, the constant humming, the new pool, the dropping water pressure. It all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. This wasn't a mistake. It was a deliberate, calculated theft. She was siphoning off gallons, hundreds, probably thousands, directly from my commercial-grade meter to fill her sprawling new swimming pool. I stood there, flashlight beam trembling slightly, looking at the undeniable evidence. The sheer audacity of it left me speechless. This wasn't going to stand, not a chance. Armed with undeniable proof, I decided to confront Karen. I approached, her politely holding the latest bill, trying to be reasonable. Her reaction was immediate and aggressive, a flurry of denial, gaslighting, and insults. "Are you accusing me? How dare you? My pool is filled by rainwater," she scoffed, her face contorted in feigned outrage. Her entitlement was palpable, making it clear she wouldn't cooperate. Realizing dialogue was useless, I resolved to gather even more concrete evidence. I set up a discreet security camera aimed at the fence line, capturing time-stamped footage of the hose in action. A few days later, the camera caught her red-handed, attaching the hose to my spigot again, oblivious to my hidden surveillance. My frustration solidified into cold resolve. It was clear Karen wasn't just annoying, she was a thief, and she needed to be stopped through official channels. The evidence was overwhelming, thanks to my precisely accurate commercial-grade meter, and it was time to involve the authorities. This was no longer just a neighborly dispute, it was a criminal matter. The process of contacting the water company and city officials was slow and tedious, marked by initial skepticism and bureaucratic red tape. However, the mention of my commercial-grade meter piqued their interest. Such precise data was hard to ignore. I presented the detailed usage logs and my camera footage. Meanwhile, Karen, perhaps sensing the walls closing in, retaliated. She filed false complaints against me with the HOA, accusing me of noise violations and property neglect, and spread malicious rumors among other neighbors. But her petty acts only fueled my determination. Eventually, a city official and a representative from the water company visited, conducting their own inspection. They were initially cautious, but the physical evidence, the concealed hose, connection, coupled with the irrefutable data from my meter, quickly convinced them. They found undeniable proof of tampering and illegal water diversion. The meeting ended with a clear declaration. A formal investigation would proceed, and Karen would face significant consequences. It wouldn't be simple. Legal action was likely. But finally, there was a breakthrough, and I knew justice was within reach. The morning after my unsettling discovery, I decided to face Karen head-on. I walked over to her house, water bill in hand, determined to be reasonable despite the anger simmering beneath my calm facade. She was out in her front yard, admiring some new hydrangeas. "Morning, Karen," I greeted, forcing a polite tone. "Do you have a moment? I just wanted to chat about something a bit unusual." She turned, her smile stretching. "Oh, neighbor. Of course." "Listen," I began, holding up the alarming bill. "I just got my latest water bill and it's astronomically high. I've noticed a few things around the yard that made me think of your new pool." I pointed to the eye-watering total. "My house has a commercial-grade meter, you see, so it's incredibly accurate. And it's showing usage that simply doesn't make sense for my house." Karen's face hardened, her smile vanishing. "My pool," she scoffed, her voice rising. "What on earth does my pool have to do with your water bill? Are you honestly suggesting that I'm stealing your water?" Her eyes narrowed. "How dare you imply such a ridiculous thing? My pool is filled with a rainwater collection system, a very expensive, eco-friendly system. You think I'd be so low as to tap into someone else's line? That's just insulting." She launched into a full-blown tirade, her face flushing crimson. "Honestly, some people just look for problems. Maybe you have a leak. Maybe your meter is broken. Don't come over here blaming innocent people for your own plumbing issues. I work hard for what I have, and I don't appreciate baseless accusations." From a neighbor who clearly can't manage their own utilities. With a dismissive wave, she turned back to her hydrangeas, treating me like a bothersome fly. My attempt at a polite conversation was a spectacular failure. Karen wasn't just denying, she was gaslighting, outright insulting me and displaying an infuriating sense of entitlement. It was clear then that cooperation was not an option. Her aggressive denial, far from deterring me, only solidified my resolve. If she wouldn't be reasonable, I'd have to be methodical. I retreated to my house, the anger now a cold, determined focus. My commercial-grade meter provided the unarguable data, but I needed irrefutable visual proof. The very next day, I purchased a small motion-activated security camera. I discreetly mounted it on a low tree branch near the fence line, carefully camouflaging it with leaves, its lens perfectly aimed at the spot where the hose disappeared through the fence, right at my outdoor spigot. I set it to record only when motion was detected. For the next few days, I also made sure to take time-stamped photos whenever I heard the telltale hum of a pump from Karen's yard or noticed my water pressure dip. I meticulously logged the date, time, and observations, building a detailed case. The real game changer arrived on a hot, still Tuesday afternoon. An alert popped up on my phone. Motion detected by the outdoor camera. My heart leaped into my throat. I quickly opened the app. There she was, Karen, unmistakable. She walked casually to the fence line, glanced around, though not thoroughly enough to spot my hidden camera, and with practiced ease, untangled the same thick green hose from its ivy camouflage. My stomach churned as she casually attached it to my spigot. I watched, transfixed and disgusted, as she turned the faucet on and the hose went taut, filling with water. The live feed showed the water gushing undeniably into her yard, presumably towards her pool. She spent a good 30 minutes watering something unseen before detaching the hose, coiling it back into its hidden spot, and walking away. The footage was crystal clear, a damning indictment of her brazen theft. My suspicions, once strong, were now irrefutable facts. Karen wasn't just a rude neighbor, she was a thief caught in the act. Watching her casual, almost arrogant movements, a cold fury settled over me. There was no more room for doubt, no more room for politeness. My attempts at being reasonable had been met with outright lies and insults. It was time to stop playing nice. Karen wouldn't cooperate, and I now had the definitive proof needed. My next step wouldn't be another chat over the fence. It would be a phone call to the water company, followed by a visit to the local authorities. Karen was about to learn that my commercial-grade meter wasn't just for show, and neither was my resolve. My fingers trembled slightly as I dialed the number for the city's water department. The satisfaction of catching Karen red-handed quickly morphed into a dread of bureaucracy, a familiar feeling of being caught in a labyrinth of automated menus and indifferent voices. After several transfers and a seemingly endless hold, a human voice finally answered, though it sounded weary, as if accustomed to a steady stream of trivial complaints about leaky faucets and unexpectedly high bills. "Yes, hello," I began, trying to keep my composure. "I believe my neighbor is illegally tapping into my water line to fill her swimming pool. My bill is astronomical, and I have irrefutable evidence." There was a beat of silence on the other end, followed by a skeptical sigh. "Ma'am, we get these calls all the time," the voice replied, tinged with an almost audible eye roll. "Usually, it's a running toilet, a faulty sprinkler head, or perhaps an unnoticed leak somewhere on the property." I pressed on, my voice gaining conviction as I explained the unique aspect of my situation, the commercial-grade meter and its unwavering accuracy. "This isn't a trickle. This is thousands of gallons," I insisted. "My meter doesn't lie, and I have clear video footage of the connection, along with time-stamped photos." That last detail seemed to pique a sliver of interest, but it was still a tentative, almost reluctant acknowledgement. I was instructed to submit a formal complaint. Online, attach my bill, and if I had any supporting documentation, to include that as well. The process felt dismissive, a bureaucratic hurdle designed to filter out the genuinely aggrieved from the merely annoyed. The online form itself was cumbersome, demanding precise dates, times, and measurements that I didn't readily have at my fingertips. It took me hours to meticulously fill out, detailing every observation, every spike in my bill, and finally, carefully uploading the damning video footage and the array of time-stamped photos I'd painstakingly collected. The entire submission process felt like shouting into a vast, indifferent void, with no immediate response or personal acknowledgement beyond a generic, automated, "Your submission has been received." While I waited, feeling increasingly isolated as the days stretched into weeks with no word from the city, Karen, subtly sensing that something was amiss, perhaps from my pointed silence or the way I now actively avoided eye contact, began her own insidious campaign of retaliation. The first signs were almost imperceptible. Then they escalated into outright harassment. Suddenly, I began receiving a series of anonymous complaints filed with our homeowners association. The notices were vague, yet irritatingly persistent. I was suddenly being cited for overgrown bushes that had been perfectly fine for years, for excessive noise late at night when I was typically asleep by 10 p.m., and even a bizarre complaint about my recycling bin being improperly placed on collection day. Each notice was designed to be impossible to truly refute, and clearly aimed at harassing me, adding another layer of frustration to my already strained nerves. Then came the whispers, the insidious spread of rumors among other neighbors. I'd hear snippets of conversations, hushed tones, and then curious judgmental glances directed my way. "Did you hear about my name?" I imagined them saying. "Apparently, she's having some sort of mental breakdown, accusing poor Karen of stealing water. Can you believe the nerve?" It was an infuriatingly effective tactic, designed to paint me as the crazy, unreliable one, someone to be avoided. I found myself feeling increasingly isolated, overwhelmed by the mounting pressure, and even a little paranoid. Every interaction with a neighbor felt scrutinized. Every casual glance seemed to carry an unspoken judgment. It was a petty, exhausting war, but one that starkly highlighted just how entitled, manipulative, and truly vindictive Karen could be when she felt threatened. Weeks crawled by, each day feeling heavier than the last, marked by the constant hum of Karen's pool pump and the oppressive weight of my rising water bill. I was starting to feel utterly defeated, drowning in a sea of high bills and relentless, neighborly gossip. Then, one Tuesday morning, a glimmer of hope appeared. A plain white utility truck, emblazoned with the city's official logo, pulled up slowly in front of my house. Two men in neat uniforms emerged, clipboards and tools in hand. One of them introduced himself as Mr. Henderson from the water department, his demeanor professional but slightly weary. The other was an inspector from the city utilities office, a man with a stern but observant gaze. My heart leaped with a cautious, almost fragile hope. "We received your complaint regarding unusual water usage and a potential neighbor dispute," Mr. Henderson stated, his tone neutral, betraying nothing. "And we did review the video you submitted. It's certainly compelling, to say the least." They asked to see my meter. I led them to the side of the house, pointing out the imposing casing of the commercial-grade meter. "This is precisely why I know for a fact something's wrong," I explained, my voice regaining some of its earlier conviction. "This type of meter isn't prone to misreading. Every single gallon used registers with extreme precision." They nodded, examining the meter closely, then comparing its current reading to my past bills. Their eyebrows raised slightly, almost imperceptibly, at the stark discrepancy. Then I showed them the fence line, pointing to the subtly concealed gap where the thick hose had snaked through. The inspector, a gruff but clearly experienced man, knelt down, carefully pulling away some of the overgrown ivy. "Well, what do you know?" he muttered under his breath almost to himself. "Looks like a fresh indentation here, right where a hose would sit." He took several high-resolution photos with his tablet, then pulled out a small specialized device designed to measure water pressure. He connected it to my outdoor spigot. "We'll run some tests," he stated, "and compare your readings to the neighborhood average, factoring in the specifics of your commercial meter." They spent another hour meticulously examining my property, checking for any hidden leaks in my pipes, and double-checking the meter's functionality. Their initial skepticism seemed to visibly wane with each passing minute, replaced by an increasing seriousness. They exchanged knowing glances, a silent confirmation that they were seeing what I had seen. Finally, Mr. Henderson turned to me, his expression now devoid of any doubt. "Ma'am," he said, his voice firm and professional, "we can definitively confirm that there's no leak on your property and your commercial meter is functioning perfectly. The data is clear." He paused, his gaze drifting towards Karen's house. "And we found compelling physical evidence of tampering and unauthorized water diversion from your line." A wave of profound relief washed over me, so intense it almost made me dizzy. They believed me. They had seen the proof. The validation, after weeks of doubt and frustration, was immense. A powerful affirmation that I wasn't crazy. So, what now? I asked, my voice a little shaky, a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. Mr. Henderson sighed, rubbing the back of his neck, a gesture of a man who knew the road ahead was complex. "Well, Miss Deek, your last name," he began. "This isn't as simple as just sending her a bill for the stolen water. This is an illegal connection, a form of utility theft, which can be considered a felony depending on the scale. Given that you have a commercial meter, the amount of water involved is undoubtedly substantial. This situation moves well beyond a simple neighborly dispute and into something the city prosecutor will likely be very interested in pursuing." The inspector chimed in, his gruff voice now more direct. "We'll need to prepare a detailed report, compile all the evidence, the meter readings, the photos, your video, our findings, and then submit it to the city's legal department. They'll likely issue a formal notice to Karen, and if she doesn't comply or disputes it, it could very well proceed to court. It's going to be a process, and frankly, it might get a little messy." My relief was now tinged with a new, daunting challenge. The authorities had acknowledged the problem, confirming my worst suspicions, but solving it wouldn't be a quick fix. It meant more waiting, more paperwork, and potentially a protracted legal battle that would demand even more of my emotional and mental energy. The battle with Karen was far from over. It had merely escalated to a new, more official, and potentially more stressful level, but at least I was no longer alone in this fight. The weeks following the utility company's inspection were a tense waiting game, a period of anxious anticipation punctuated by the lingering dread of Karen's petty retaliations. But then it arrived. A thick envelope, official and imposing, bearing the city seal. It wasn't just a letter, it was a formal intervention, a meticulously drafted document from the city attorney's office and the water department. It detailed the findings of their investigation, citing illegal water diversion from my commercial-grade meter, violations of city ordinances, and the substantial financial damages incurred. It outlined the impending legal action if an immediate resolution wasn't reached, including back-billing for thousands of gallons of stolen water at a premium rate, hefty fines, and potential criminal charges for utility theft. A separate, equally stern letter from the water department specifically mentioned the irrefutable data from my commercial meter as the cornerstone of their case, highlighting how its precision left no room for doubt regarding the immense volume of water illicitly consumed. This was no longer a neighborly dispute. It was a clear-cut case of fraud and theft, meticulously documented by official bodies. Karen's reaction to this official pressure was immediate and, predictably, explosive. The veneer of polite disdain she'd maintained for weeks shattered completely. At first, she adopted the persona of the aggrieved victim. I heard her loudly complaining to other neighbors, theatrical tears welling in her eyes, about how I was harassing her, making false accusations, and how this was a malicious attack from a jealous neighbor. She even tried to approach me. Once, her voice laced with feigned hurt. "How could you do this to me? I thought we were friends. You're ruining my life." I simply stared at her, my expression unwavering, and she retreated, her performance clearly not having the desired effect on me. However, her victim act quickly gave way to desperation and heightened aggression. She started parking her car inconveniently close to my driveway, leaving her trash bins directly in front of my mailbox, and even going so far as to loudly play obnoxious music with crude lyrics whenever I was outside. It was a pathetic but infuriating escalation of her petty warfare. Her attempts to intimidate me were transparent, a clear sign that the official papers had landed, and they had landed hard. The legal team, bolstered by the irrefutable evidence from my commercial meter, wasn't idle during this time. They initiated further evidence gathering that solidified the case beyond any shadow of a doubt. This included official, independent readings from the water meter itself, showing abnormal spikes correlating precisely with the periods I had documented Karen's pool activity. They also conducted a thorough official inspection of the underground water lines in the easement between our properties, which, to Karen's likely horror, revealed subtle but distinct pipe alterations on her side that were consistent with an illegal tap. Furthermore, the city's forensic water analysis confirmed that the water in Karen's pool matched the unique chemical composition of the city's municipal supply, ruling out her ludicrous rainwater collection claim. Each piece of evidence meticulously stacked up, forming an impenetrable wall of proof. The turning point, the dramatic direct confrontation that would serve as the climax of this sordid affair, came during a mandatory mediation session called by the city prosecutor's office. It wasn't a court hearing, but it felt just as formal, with 2 city attorneys, a water department supervisor, Karen, and myself present. Karen walked in, radiating an air of indignant defiance, flanked by a nervous-looking, clearly out-of-his-depth local attorney she had likely just hired. I was there alone, but felt a quiet confidence, armed with truth and meticulous documentation. The city attorney laid out the case, calmly presenting the accumulated evidence. My astronomical bills, the precise commercial meter readings, the time-stamped photos, my video footage of Karen connecting the hose, and the results of their independent inspections. He even showed a diagram of the illegal tap identified by their experts. Karen's attorney attempted to argue procedural errors and insufficient proof, but his voice lacked conviction. Then, the city attorney projected my video footage onto a screen. The image of Karen's face, clear as day, connecting that hose to my spigot, was damning. The room fell silent, save for the hum of the projector. Karen's face drained of all color, her aggressive posture wilting. It was during this silent, tension-filled moment that the water department supervisor, a stern woman who had overseen the initial inspection, spoke up. "Ms. Hayes," she addressed Karen, her voice cutting through the silence, "our commercial meter data from Miss my last name's property is unequivocal. It shows a water output equivalent to operating a small business, not a residential home. Your claim of rainwater collection is completely contradicted by our forensic analysis of your pool water, which is a perfect match for the municipal supply. Furthermore, our team has identified and documented the illegal connection point on your property. This isn't speculation. It's undeniable usage on a precisely calibrated meter, backed by physical evidence. Your only option here is to acknowledge the theft and agree to a restitution plan." The air in the room crackled with the weight of her words. Karen's attorney mumbled something about negotiation, but Karen herself was visibly trembling. Her defiant facade crumbled entirely. The bravado, the arrogance, the victim act, it all evaporated under the relentless onslaught of objective, irrefutable proof. She looked at the screen, at the image of herself, then at me, a flicker of something akin to fear, or perhaps just cold, hard realization in her eyes. The game was up. She had been caught red-handed, with no avenue for denial. The tension built to an almost unbearable crescendo as she finally understood. She couldn't escape the consequences. The precision of my commercial-grade meter, once just a unique feature of my old house, had become the silent, relentless witness to her crime, ensuring that every stolen gallon was accounted for. Her desperate attempts to play the victim or retaliate had only served to prolong the inevitable. The city attorney then slid a document across the table. It was a proposed settlement outlining the full repayment for the stolen water, calculated meticulously from my meter readings, significant fines, and a formal agreement to dismantle the illegal connection within 24 hours under the supervision of city officials or face immediate criminal prosecution. Karen's attorney, clearly defeated, whispered to her, urging her to comply. Her shoulders slumped. With a defeated sigh and a face etched with bitter resentment, Karen finally, implicitly, admitted her guilt by reluctantly reaching for the pen. The definitive proof had been presented, accepted, and the long, frustrating battle for justice was finally nearing its resolution. The stage was now set for the final, satisfying conclusion to this brazen act of neighborly theft. The pen scratched across the paper, a sound that, to me, was sweeter than any symphony. Karen, her face a mask of bitter defeat, signed the settlement agreement. The document outlined her comprehensive penalties. A staggering back bill for the stolen water, meticulously calculated from the precise readings of my commercial-grade meter, totaling over $5,000. On top of that, she faced substantial fines for violating city ordinances related to illegal utility tampering. There would be no lengthy court battle, no protracted legal proceedings. The overwhelming evidence, particularly the undeniable data from my meter and the damning video footage, had left her no recourse. Justice, though slow and arduous, had finally arrived. A profound wave of relief and satisfaction washed over me, a feeling lighter and more liberating than I'd experienced in months. It was the satisfaction of being believed, of standing firm, and of witnessing a bully finally face consequences. The constant hum of anxiety that had lived in my chest for weeks finally faded, replaced by a sense of calm. My water bill, once a source of dread, returned to its normal, manageable amount, a silent testament to the victory. The financial implications for Karen were severe. $5,000 plus fines was a significant sum that clearly hit her hard. Within weeks, the shimmering blue pool that had been the instrument of her crime was drained and dismantled, a stark, gaping hole left in her backyard. Her once meticulously manicured lawn started to look neglected. She rarely left her house, and when she did, her usual boisterous demeanor was replaced by a sullen silence. The brightly colored athleisure wear was swapped for drab, nondescript clothing. The entire ordeal had clearly been a harsh public lesson for her. The neighborhood dynamics shifted dramatically. Initially, during Karen's rumor-spreading campaign, there had been whispers and averted gazes. But once the city's formal action became apparent, and especially after the pool disappeared, the tide turned. Neighbors who had previously given me the cold shoulder now offered apologetic smiles. Many approached me, some hesitantly, to express their support, admitting they had always suspected something was off about Karen but hadn't known what. The gossip persisted, but now it was about Karen's downfall, not my supposed breakdown. She became ostracized, a pariah in her own community. While she didn't move immediately, her presence became a muted, unwelcome shadow. In the aftermath, my home truly felt like a sanctuary again. The peace I had lost was fully restored. I could water my plants, take a shower, or simply relax without the nagging worry of exorbitant bills or the infuriating knowledge that someone else was benefiting from my property. This entire experience taught me the importance of standing up for yourself when something feels wrong, even when facing an aggressive, entitled individual. It reinforced that while bureaucracy can be frustrating, persistence and irrefutable evidence can indeed lead to justice. And as for my commercial-grade meter, it now stands as a symbol of my quiet triumph. It's no longer just a precise measuring instrument. It's the silent, unwavering witness that ensured every stolen drop of water was accounted for, delivering justice with unerring accuracy. Sometimes the most mundane things hold the greatest power when you least expect it. I still get a chuckle, sometimes when I imagine Karen's face, realizing that the very quirk of my old house was what ultimately led to her undoing.